Day 10, December 10th, diddly squat. The sign appeared at 8:47 in the morning. Chipping Norton, please drive carefully. Steven saw it from the Defender. I know because Mac told me afterward. The way Steven went completely still in the passenger seat. The way his hand came up briefly and then came down again. The way he looked at the sign until it was passed and then looked at the road ahead with the specific expression of a man who has just been handed the proximity of something he has been carrying for a long time. Mac said nothing. He drove. He gave Steven the silence the moment required. Which was, from Mac, everything. The farm appeared from the road at 9:15. I had the same anticipation meets reality experience that real places always produce against the mental image built from other sources. In this case, television, because like almost everyone on the planet, I had watched the show and had built a version of the farm from it that contained all the elements of the actual farm and none of the actual farm's specific quality of simply existing in space. The hand-painted sign. The low stone building. The gate. All of it exactly right and entirely surprising. Mac pulled the Defender to a stop outside the gate. I pulled the Volvo alongside. The Howarths pulled up behind us in the Silver Estate. Captain Biscuit's face appeared in their back window with his assessment of the new location, ears forward, interested, positive overall verdict. We got out. Steven stood at the gate. I have already written about this moment in the earlier version of this account, and I wrote it wrong. I wrote it as a clean emotional beat, a moment of arrival and resolution. It wasn't that. It was more complicated than that. Because he was standing at the gate of a place that had been a dream for 15 years. A specific dream. A dream with a name and a shape and a television program attached, in circumstances that were as far from the dream's original context as it was possible to be while still being in the same country. He had come to England to stand here with a camera and a shot list and a YouTube channel. He was standing here with a cricket bat and a pandemic and 4 people he had known for 3 days. He was standing here hungry, the specific hollow hunger of day 10, the hunger that had stopped being a note and had become a presence. He was standing here with an unfinished letter in his notebook to a woman in Germany who had him blocked. He was standing here because the world had broken and the road west went past this gate, and they needed what was on the other side of it. He was standing here. That was the whole of it. And he was here. That was enough. He reached into his jacket pocket. He found his phone. He opened the Notes app. He found the unfinished intro. He read it. He pressed record. Right, I'm Steven Vox, Hot Gear Cape Town. And I am standing in England. Which still feels insane to say out loud. I grew up watching a man stand roughly here and tell me that cars are the greatest thing human beings have ever made. I'm not sure I disagree. My name is not Jeremy Clarkson. I don't have his budget, his contacts, his hair, or his ability to accidentally offend entire nations before breakfast. What I have. He paused. He looked at the farm. He looked at Mac leaning against the Defender with his arms folded watching the gate with the professional attention he gave all perimeters. He looked at Stacy, who had found a stone to sit on and was talking to Molly Howarth, 7 years old, blonde, currently telling Stacy something with the specific urgency of a 7-year-old who has found a person who will listen, with the focused warmth of someone who has found her thing and is doing it. He looked at Sarah, standing beside the Volvo with her notebook open, and her pen moving and her eyes going between the notebook and the farm buildings, with the particular quality of someone cataloging a new environment. He looked at me. I was watching him. He looked back at the camera. What I have is, I have a camera, and a notebook, and a guitar that survived a pandemic in a hostel near Elephant and Castle, and a cricket bat named Clarkson. And I have people. I have a writer who kept talking when everyone else went quiet. A soldier who carries a children's book with his service pistol. A scientist whose notebook is the most important document in England. An architect who sees what buildings can bear. A family with a border collie named Captain Biscuit, who has assessed every situation and found it acceptable. And I am standing at a gate in Oxfordshire in December on day 10 of a pandemic, and I am hungry and tired, and there is a letter in my notebook I haven't finished, and somewhere in Germany a woman has me blocked, and I don't know if any of this is going to be all right. But I'm here. I'm standing here. And Jeremy. His voice changed. Just slightly. If you're watching this somewhere, from wherever you've ended up. I made it. The long way round. But I made it. Hot Gear Cape Town. England. Day 10. He stopped recording. He put his phone away. He stood at the gate for one more moment. Then he opened it. Gerald was in the farm shop. Shotgun across his knees. Thermos flask of tea. The expression of someone who has been alone for 10 days and prepared for company and is now performing the specific controlled nonchalance of a man who had known they were coming and has decided not to make a thing of it. He looked at the group assembling in the doorway of the farm shop. Mac, Steven, me, Stacy, Sarah, David, and Claire Howarth with Molly and Jake, Captain Biscuit sitting at David's heel with his assessment face on, and Professor Sprout in her carrier regarding Gerald from within it with the green-eyed evaluation of a cat meeting a stranger. Gerald looked at all of this. He looked at Captain Biscuit. Captain Biscuit looked at Gerald. Something passed between them, the specific communication of a border collie and a man of a certain age who has lived alone on a farm for a decade and has opinions about dogs that he has not shared with anyone. Right, Gerald said. Took your time. Traffic, Mac said. Gerald looked at Mac. Mac looked at Gerald. Something passed between them too, different from the dog communication, more layered, the recognition of two men who have been in the same kinds of rooms in the same kinds of situations and don't need to discuss the rooms or the situations to establish the fact of it. Tea, Gerald said. He produced cups from behind the counter. Enough cups, exactly enough as though he had counted the approaching vehicles and calculated the occupants. Which, I realized, he probably had. Gerald Webb, I said. He looked at me. KJ GROWLING, he said. Yes. You're taller than I expected, he said. You're exactly what I expected, I said. Something moved in his face. Sit down, he said. I'll show you the kitchen. Steven was already looking at the farm with the eye of a man who grew up cooking and can identify a proper kitchen from the outside of a building at 50 paces. Gerald, he said. Yes. Do you have a cast iron pot? Gerald looked at him. 3, Gerald said. Steven closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked like a man who has been told something he had hoped was true and now knows it is true. Right, he said. I'm going to cook tonight. Tell me what you have. Come through to the kitchen, Gerald said. They went through to the kitchen. Mac watched them go. He moves like he's done that before, Mac said, not to anyone specifically, an observation delivered to the room. He has, I said, his whole life. Mac looked at the kitchen doorway. Good, he said. Day 10, the farm, the kitchen, the root cellar, the chickens. The root cellar changed everything. I want to be precise about the nature of the change, not dramatic, not instantaneous, but real and significant and felt in the body before it was processed by the brain. We had been hungry. The root cellar was not an end to hunger. It was not that abundant, not for 10 people plus a dog and a cat, not for an uncertain duration. But it was a revision of the mathematics that had been running in all of our heads since day 8 when the food inventory had been calculated, and the number of days at the bottom of the calculation had been smaller than we wanted. Potatoes, parsnips, carrots, beetroot, onions stored in mesh bags hanging from hooks in the ceiling, Preserved goods on shelves, jams, pickles, the specific variety of a farm that had been producing its own food before the concept of needing to was relevant. Steven stood in the root cellar doorway and looked at it for a long time. Then he turned to Gerald. "How long has this been here?" he said. "Some of it since October," Gerald said. "The preserved goods longer." "You've been managing this alone for 10 days. "Yes." "Being careful." "Yes." "Gerald." "Yes." "I'm going to make something tonight that is going to make you understand why being careful was worth it." Gerald looked at him. "I've been eating bread and cheese for 10 days, Gerald said. "I know," Steven said. "That ends tonight." Gerald looked at the root cellar. He looked at Steven. "There's a lamb in the freezer," he said. "I was saving it." "For what?" Steven said. A pause. "I don't know," Gerald said. "For when it felt like the right time." "Gerald," Steven said. "Yes. This is the right time." The chickens were discovered by Molly Howarth at 11 in the morning, when she followed Captain Biscuit around the side of the farm building and found the henhouse. 6 chickens. Margaret, Dorothy, Susan, Phyllis, Enid, and Keith. Molly reported back to the group with the specific breathless urgency of a 7-year-old delivering news of the highest importance. "There are chickens," she said. "Yes," Gerald said. "6 of them." "Yes." "One of them is called Keith." "Yes." "Why is one of them called Keith?" "Keith turned out to be a hen," Gerald said. "By the time we established this, the name had stuck." Molly considered this. "Can I give them some food?" she said. "Yes," Gerald said. Molly went back around the side of the building. Gerald looked at the group. "She's going to be fine," he said, quietly. Claire Howarth, standing beside her husband with her hand in his, heard this. She looked at Gerald. "Thank you," she said. Gerald nodded once. He went inside. Mac assessed the farm buildings with the thoroughness he brought to every new environment. He walked the perimeter twice. He noted every access point, every sight line, every potential approach. He looked at the gate and the fence and the farm track and the relationship between the track and the road and the road and the landscape around it. He came back to where I was sitting in the kitchen with a mug of Gerald's tea and his notebook. Not my notebook, his notebook, the small tactical one he kept in his breast pocket, the one I had glimpsed but not been shown, and he sat across from me and he looked at the table for a moment. "It's a good position," he said. "Yes," I said. "The track from the road is long enough to give warning," he said. "If we maintain a proper watch rotation, the farm buildings provide good cover on 3 sides. The 4th, the north field, is open but has sightlines." "You're thinking about defense," I said. "I'm always thinking about defense," he said. "Even here." "Especially here," he said. "Comfortable positions make people less careful. Less careful gets people hurt." I looked at him. "The scar," I said. "The man." "Yes," he said. "He's moving west." "He has been moving west since day 2, Mac said. "He reads every post. He has the survival guidance. He knows we moved. He knows we were in a university building in South London. He knows we were heading west." He paused. "He doesn't know this farm, not yet." "The thread." "I know you won't name it," Mac said, "but he's building a map from everything that has been named. The A-road, the Cotswolds, the distances implied by the timing of posts. He's smart. He's patient. He's been doing this since before the outbreak." He looked at me. "How long until he narrows it down?" I thought about this. "Days," I said. "A week at most." Mac nodded. "Which means we don't stay here longer than necessary," he said. "We prepare for portin' down. We do the work, we move." "And if he gets here before we're ready to move?" Mac looked at the kitchen table. At the farm around him. At Gerald visible through the window, walking between the henhouse and the main barn with the specific deliberate pace of someone doing the things he has always done on this farm and will continue to do regardless. Then we deal with it, Mac said. He said it the way he said the things that were terrible and needed to be said plainly. Gerald, I said. Yes, Mac said, I know. We sat with that. The kitchen. The sounds of the farm. Steven in the kitchen, talking to Gerald about the lamb. Stacy somewhere with Molly and the chickens. Sarah at the table with the satellite phone and her notebook. The world outside doing what it was doing. Watch rotation, Mac said, starting tonight. Yes, I said. He went to organize it. I picked up my phone. At KJ GROWLING, 11:34 a.m. day 10. We have found somewhere. I'm not going to say where. I'm going to say it has a root cellar. And 6 chickens. One of whom is named Keith. Keith is a hen. Keith has always been a hen. This was established too late to change the name. I find this deeply reassuring for reasons I cannot fully articulate. Also, there will be lamb tonight. I want everyone reading this to know that there will be lamb tonight. Not as a boast. As a marker. A proof that the world still contains lamb and people who can cook it, and root cellars full of things that were grown in the ground before any of this started, and will be eaten by people who needed them. That's everything. That's genuinely everything. Stay alive. KJ. Egg 401M speech, balloon 312M. Days 11 through 17, the farm, the rhythm. I want to tell you about the rhythm of the farm days because the rhythm matters, and because the rhythm is what made what happened on day 19 possible and impossible simultaneously. The farm had a rhythm before we arrived. Gerald's rhythm, the specific daily pattern of a man who has been alone on a working farm for 10 days and has maintained the farm's requirements not because he didn't know everything was different, but because maintaining the farm's requirements was the way he managed everything being different. The chickens needed feeding. The chickens were fed. The borehole pump needed checking. The borehole pump was checked. The perimeter needed walking. The perimeter was walked. We folded into this rhythm within 2 days because rhythm, the predictable sequence of necessary things, is what a group of people in an uncertain situation needs more than almost anything else. Mac took the perimeter walk and expanded it. Steven took the cooking and made it the central event of every day, not elaborate. The ingredients didn't allow for elaborate, but deliberate. Thought through. The specific attention to a meal that signals to everyone eating it that they were worth the attention. Sarah had her satellite phone calls with Dr. Okonkwo and her notebook and her work, which was the most important work happening anywhere, but which from outside looked simply like a woman sitting at a table writing. Stacy took the building. She walked every room of the farmhouse every morning with the architectural eye. She had applied to every space she'd occupied since day 4, noting changes, assessing load-bearing, identifying the things that needed addressing before they needed addressing. And she took Molly. Not formally, not by assignment. Simply, Molly Howarth gravitated toward Stacy with the specific certainty of a 7-year-old who has identified the person in the group whose energy matches hers, and Stacy received this with the warmth of someone who had been looking, without knowing she was looking, for exactly this function. Molly and Stacy spent 2 hours every morning with the chickens. Keith presided over these sessions with the dignity of a hen who considers herself the legitimate authority in the henhouse and is tolerating the human interest in her domain. Captain Biscuit attended every session. Captain Biscuit had opinions about Keith. Keith had opinions about Captain Biscuit. These opinions were managed with the careful diplomacy of a border collie who has decided that the hen is not worth escalating over, and a hen who has decided that the dog is not worth moving for. Jake Howarth, 10, quiet, the careful stillness of a child who has been processing 10 days of the world being very different and has not yet found his way through to the other side of the processing, found Mac. Or Mac found Jake. The specifics were unclear. What was clear was that by day 12 Jake Howarth was following Mac around the perimeter in the mornings, with the silent, focused attention of a boy who had decided that the most useful thing he could do was understand what the most useful person in the group was doing. Mac did not comment on this. He simply incorporated Jake into the perimeter walk. He showed him, without fanfare, what to look for. The gate, the fence, the track, the field to the north, what normal looked like so that abnormal was identifiable. Jake absorbed this with the seriousness of a 10-year-old who has understood that the serious thing is the way through. On day 14, Jake spotted the footprints. Day 14, the footprints. They were on the north side of the farm track. Not at the gate, not a direct approach. In the verge, the muddy December verge beside the farm track, 20 yards from the gate and 30 yards from the road. Someone had stood there. The prints were deep, a heavy person, or a person who had been there long enough for their weight to fully sink into the mud. 2 prints, side by side, facing the farm. They had stood and faced the farm. Then they had gone back toward the road. Jake found them at 7:45 in the morning and came to Mac immediately, not running, not panicking, the quiet, controlled urgency of a 10-year-old who had been paying attention and was delivering a report. Mac went to look at them. He crouched beside the prints for a long time. He looked at the road. He looked at the farm. He looked at the prints. He came back inside. He told me. I told the group. Nobody panicked. This was the thing about the farm rhythm. It had produced in all of us a specific quality of managed response that meant the footprints were received as information rather than catastrophe. Terrible information. But information. When, I said. Yesterday evening or last night, Mac said. The rain this morning would have softened the edges if they'd been there before yesterday. He found us, Steven said. Someone found us, Mac said. We don't know it's him. Who else would stand in a verge and look at a farm for 20 minutes and then leave? Steven said. Mac said nothing, which was its own answer. At KJ GROWLING 8:34 a.m. day 14. To the man with the scar. You were here last night. I know. I want you to know that I know. And I want you to know that knowing changes nothing about what we're doing. We are still doing it. Every day. The thread is still live. The satellites are still turning. You cannot read this without 600 million other people reading it at the same time. That is the nature of the thing you are trying to use against us. It cannot be used against us. It can only be used. KJ. Egg 378, M speech, balloon 267 M. Cole Devereaux read this post at 8:41 in the morning, sitting in a building in Marlborough that he had identified and secured on day 12 as his forward position, 8 miles from the farm, close enough for observation runs, far enough for operational security. He read it twice. He put his phone down. He looked at the 11 people around him, his people, the ones who had come willingly or come because the alternative Cole had presented was worse, and had over the days resolved into something that looked, from outside, like a functioning group. He thought about the post. He thought about what KJ GROWLING understood and what she didn't understand. She understood that he was close. She understood that the thread was not a weapon he could turn against them. She didn't understand, couldn't understand from her position, the full shape of what he was building. He picked up his phone. He went back to reading the thread. He had always been reading the thread. He would keep reading it. Every word was useful, even the words that were aimed at him. Especially those. Days 15 through 18, the hunger again, the work, the cold. The lamb from day 10 had been extraordinary. Everything after the lamb was the return of the mathematics. The root cellar was substantial, but not infinite. 10 people plus a dog and a cat made calculations that Gerald's original 2-person estimate had not accounted for, and the rhythm of Steven's cooking, as good as it was, and as much as it did for morale and the specific human need to eat something that had been thought about, could not change the arithmetic of what was in the root cellar against the number of mouths and the number of days. By day 15, the portions were reduced again. Not to the crisis point, not the point that Sarah referred to with the clinical precision she applied to everything, as the threshold where the body begins making decisions the brain hasn't approved, but noticeably, meaningfully, the specific reduction that produces in a group of people who have been managing carefully the collective awareness that the management is getting harder. Gerald noticed David Howarth looking at the portion sizes at lunch on day 15. He said nothing about it in the moment. That evening, he took David aside and showed him the root cellar inventory. They came out of the root cellar with an agreement and a revised schedule that accounted for 10 people at reduced portions across a projected timeline. David Howarth, engineer, had a spreadsheet on his phone's offline mode that he had been maintaining since day 2. Gerald had been maintaining equivalent calculations in his head since day 10. The two systems matched within 3 days of each other. "You could have been an engineer," David said. "I could have been a lot of things," Gerald said. He went to make tea. The cold arrived properly on day 16. Not the December cold that had been present since day 1, the ambient chill, the specific gray of a British winter that doesn't commit fully to being terrible, but doesn't allow for comfort either. This was a different cold. A front coming in from the north, the kind that the BBC Weather Service, no longer broadcasting weather, focused entirely on emergency information from Nigel's position on the kitchen table, would have called a significant temperature drop. The kind that made the farmhouse's old stone walls feel thin. The kind that made the generator fuel, consumed partly for heat, a more pressing consideration. Mac and Gerald spent day 16 doing the fuel calculation together, a conversation conducted in the specific shorthand of two men who have both been in situations where resources were finite, and the management of them was the difference between acceptable outcomes and unacceptable ones. The conclusion was careful, more careful than they had been. The generator for charging devices, for the Farlink receiver on the roof, for Nigel in the kitchen. Not for heat, not unless it became medically necessary. Heat from the Aga, which ran on the farm's own solid fuel supply that Gerald had stocked before the outbreak, with the instinct of a man who had lived through enough difficult winters to know that fuel was not something you ran low on. And from each other. The evenings gathered in the kitchen, all 10 of them, plus Captain Biscuit, who had determined that the kitchen was the warmest room, and had established himself at the Aga's side with the settled authority of a dog who has made a reasonable decision and is not entertaining counterarguments. The evenings became their own thing. Not planned, not organized by Mac or orchestrated by anyone. Simply the cold outside, the warmth inside, the specific gravity of people who have been through the same days and need somewhere to put them. Stories. Gerald's carefully measured, the version with the government department's details removed, the shape of a life that had taken him from places he wouldn't name to a farm in Oxfordshire that he had been building, without knowing it, into exactly what it had become. David and Claire Howarth's, the specific narrative of a family that had been on a half-term trip to Oxford when the outbreak began, and had made the decision, on day 2, not to try to get home to London, and had not regretted it, and had found Gerald's white sheet above the farm shop from the road, and had followed the Farlink thread and the silver estate car and arrived. Molly's delivered with the unfiltered directness of a 7-year-old who considers all information equally relevant. Her assessment of Keith's personality, complex. Her theory about why Captain Biscuit and Keith had established their current diplomatic arrangement, mutual respect. Her view of the outbreak generally, very boring except for the chickens. Jake's stories were always quiet, delivered in the gaps between other people's stories with the careful placement of someone who had been listening and had saved the right thing for the right moment. He told Mac, on day 17, about the book he'd been reading before the outbreak. A James Herbert, found on his parents' bookshelf, probably too old for him, definitely too old for him. He had read it anyway because the world had revised the concept of age-appropriate. Mac listened to this. "You like horror," Mac said. "I like things that aren't boring," Jake said. Mac looked at him for a moment. He reached into his pack. He produced the Harry Potter paperback. He put it on the table between them. "It's not horror," Mac said. Jake looked at the book. "My teacher used to read it to us," Jake said. "Your teacher had good taste," Mac said. Jake picked up the book. He opened it. He read the first line. He looked at Mac. "Will you?" he started. "Yes," Mac said. He read to Jake that evening in the corner of the kitchen. 20 minutes. His voice low, below the watch threshold, the specific measured quiet of someone who has thought about every word before saying it and has decided these ones are worth saying. The group noticed. Nobody said anything. Some things are too important to comment on. Steven wrote, "Every night, after the kitchen emptied, after Mac took his watch and Gerald took his watch, and Sarah went to her room to continue the work that never fully stopped, and Stacy fell asleep with the immediate complete sleep of someone whose body has decided that sleep is non-negotiable and is not accepting arguments to the contrary. Steven sat at the kitchen table with his small notebook and wrote the letter. Not all at once. In pieces. Each piece added at the end of a day that had given him something he wanted to put in it. An observation, a detail, the specific quality of a memory that the day had surfaced. He wrote about Cape Town, the apartment, the broken blind that let the afternoon light in at a specific angle, the way she said Jano exactly, precisely, yes for agreement, which he had absorbed without noticing until he found himself saying it and having to explain it to people who looked at him questioningly. He wrote about the baby scare. Not at length, in the specific way that the most important things sometimes get the fewest words because the words are inadequate, and he knew they were inadequate and wrote them anyway because the not writing of them was worse. He wrote about the COVID pandemic, the emergency flights, the FaceTime calls that got shorter as the weeks went on, not because there was less to say, but because the distance had started doing what distance does when there is no clear end to it. He wrote about the insecurity, the specific wound of someone who had grown up being told in various ways by various people that he was not quite enough, and who had carried that into the one relationship where it was least true, and had not been able to believe it wasn't true there either. "I thought you deserved better," he wrote. "I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something people say when they mean something else. I mean it the way I wrote it. I looked at you, and I could not understand why you were there, and I kept waiting for the moment you understood your mistake, and I tried to make the moment happen before it could happen on its own. That was wrong. I know that now the way I knew it then, but couldn't stop it then. The pandemic gave me 10 days. This pandemic has given me, I don't know yet, however long. I used the first one badly. I am trying to use this one better." He looked at what he'd written. He closed the notebook. He went to bed. December 25th was coming.
If you would like to know more about history on a specific person, time or place, or even just fictional creativity like adventure, horror, zombie survival, take a moment and drop us a comment down below for your request, or send us a mail and the team here at Wolfcroft Stories will be glad to mention your preferred name as to the inspiration to the video to the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to know, learn or listen to more, like these, why not give us a like and subscribe for more. Wishing you a safe and grand week ahead from the team at Wolfcroft Stories.